Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint and Office 365 Community Webinar. My name is Shane and I am delighted to be joined by Marcus Alt and Daniel Translator, who will be talking to you about end-to-end digital transformations. Remember to join in the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC16. After the webinar, we will have a questions and answers session. Type any question you have for Marcus or Daniel in the questions window. Some questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded and you will be notified by email when it is available. And now I'm going to pass you over to our webinar presenter, Marcus Alt. Hello, Marcus. Hello, Marcus. Can you hear me?
All right. Thanks, Jake. Yes, I hear you. Let me quickly wait until I can share everything, and I'm waiting for you feedback to confirm that everybody can see my screen.
Yeah, I can see it here. That's great.
All right. Thanks for the introductions. And so let's get started. So what we have here today is actually really an end-to-end sample implementation we built using SharePoint with K2 technology combined. And into play there is a fair amount of DocuSign technology, of DocuSign's cloud service as well, to actually handle a real digital signature for important documents that you're routing through your organization. So what we're going to do is actually to split things up a little bit. So I'm going to hand over the control to Daniel from DocuSign, who will take it away from there and do a bit of a positioning around DocuSign, so you are actually in sync and understand what you're looking at later on in the demo. And then I'm going to pick it up and do the same thing for K2 and end up in the live demonstration that we have actually prepared for you. So let me then give control to Daniel. That should actually already work. So Daniel, just go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Marcus, thank you. So, hi, everybody. Thank you for being here in this webinar, either if you're seeing it live or recorded. So, my name is Daniel Translator. I'm part of the DocuSign team. I'm in charge of business development in EMEA, in different territories. A little bit about for you about DocuSign, for the ones of you that don't know us, or maybe you don't know enough about us as well. So DocuSign today has more than 120 million customers, users worldwide, and this number is growing fast. We're growing about a ratio of 90,000 new users a day. Today we are 2,200 employees and growing, and 3 recent acquisitions that we made that are very important, for example, for Europe, is we acquired a ARX or Cosign, and now it's part of the DocuSign solution, enabling us to have the best solution both for the cloud and on-premise and hybrid. And at the same time, we also acquired OpenTrust, a certification authority, a trust service provider in Europe, to enable us to give up to the highest levels of security and levels of signatures into the EMEA market. So we've managed to grow and to be very influential in the market and to get to these numbers of users by some of our class investors. We can see, for example, some of the strategic ones. So all of them are partners who are both investors, resellers, and also customers. So a good example for this case that we're talking will be Microsoft. Microsoft today has around 400 use cases where they're using DocuSign for signing all of the processes, both for internal and external, where there is a need for a signature. But you can see here others like Deutsche Telekom, SAP, Salesforce, and others who are using it. By the way, you can also see some international banks and companies, but also public institutions who are investing in DocuSign. DocuSign is a global platform. In that perspective, we have offices all around the world. Our EMEA headquarters are in London. Our global headquarters are in the UK, in San Francisco, sorry. But in that perspective, we are looking to offer solutions that are both available and legally binding for the local market as well as global markets. So you can see here, for example, we have interesting customers all around the world, like Australia, Brazil, France, Germany, Japan, Netherlands, UK, and Canada. In that perspective, we are a company that's looking to solve and to enable our customers to have worldwide solutions that will be giving them legal binding documents. So, for example, we comply with everything that has to do even with digital qualified advanced signature for Europe. Everything has to do with HIPAA and other levels for the Americas and FDA regulated markets. But at the same time, we also comply with the HANCO, for example, for Japan or China. So in that perspective, we give a worldwide overview of the solution. Same time, the best and the places where we see verticals where we see a lot of DocuSign in them is definitely real estate, financial services, insurance, healthcare, technology, communication, government. But at the end of the day, you can see it everywhere. From McDonald's to Tesla, you can see that they're using DocuSign today for signing different processes internally. When we're talking about DocuSign, we have the idea is to offer a solution that will enable our customers as part of a process. And in this case, for example, we're talking with K2 and a SharePoint environment, where we basically want to enable the full transaction to be digital. Today, in many cases, you need to print, sign, scan a document and this is slow and very costly. And what we're doing is basically helping our customers to have a document, and this document, either if it's looking for adding more data, collecting data, or updating data in their own systems, and with a workflow enabling these customers to have the ability to both internally and externally ask for a person to be able to execute both an authentication, which we offer different levels of authentication, including one-time password, SMS, etc., static passwords as well, a signature, templates that enable us to make it even easier, and even payments. So we're, for example, adding very strongly many methods of payment that along the way, you can always already ask the customer to be able to pay for a transaction during the process inside DocuSign. At the same time, we can also offer the managed to help reporting, retention, and audit trail of the processes, which give the customer a better understanding of what's going on, how to maintain the data, and how to gather all the legal information if there's any need to defend this process. In that sense, DocuSign is a bank-grade security organization, so we comply with the highest levels of security worldwide. We comply with carrier-grade availability. This basically means that we comply with 99.99% availability. And actually, historically, we're 99.997, which means only 3 minutes down a year. And in this case, for our EMEA and European, especially European customers, we have the ability we have 3 data centers in EMEA, France, Germany, and Netherlands, which there resides all of the information of our European customers, and in this way comply with the European courts clauses and regulations. We have a global architecture. We have the ability for doing standard-based signatures, which is the ability to sign both in advanced and qualified levels as part of legal requirements. And we have an open integration framework that includes APIs, web services, SDKs, REST API, etc., to enable customers to be able to integrate. And we have a huge set of pre-existing integrations, over 150,000 to 200,000 existing integration with most of the products that you may think about it. But we're much more than signatures. In that sense, if, for example, we have a transaction, we have a document, and we want to automate it, we can also do the signature and the ID of the person. In that sense, we can also get data out to the customer and gather that data from the customer and put it back internally. We can also do payments, as I said before, and everything is behind a workflow that enables this process to be done seamlessly and digitally without the need of anything to go out of the process. So DocuSign is a great place to assist in notifications, acknowledgement of processes, approve of rejects of a process as well, collection of data, and signing documents as well. As I said, for our European customers, it's very important to be able to be legally binding, and in this sense, we are committed to comply with EIDAS. We have the ability today to offer advanced and qualified signatures, as I said. This can be done either provided by our DocuSign own TSP or different processes, but we also work with trusted third-party certification authorities all over Europe. That with them we can offer solutions for our customers, and also we can offer signer-held solutions for where it's needed. At the end of the day, the idea is to have the ability to offer our customers an easy to use end-to-end workflow with the highest level of security and the highest level of legally binding. As I said, DocuSign can be done and can be used standalone in our different levels from everywhere you are, in your mobile, in your desktop, Mac, Windows, whatever you're using. Pre-built integrations, as you can see, we have many, and this is just a short taste of them. And we have also, as I said, a large and very successful tools to enable you to use DocuSign as end-to-end workflows, custom-made or tailor-made in that perspective. So I share now to Marcus so that you can continue from here.
All right. Thank you, Daniel. That was great. So let me take back control here, and let's get to the K2 part. So, I mean, first of all, we're here in the context of a big event we're all looking forward to, a European SharePoint Conference 2016. So, of course, let's not forget that we, of course, will have our booth there. We have actually prepared a lot of use cases, a lot of live demonstrations. We also have a giveaway, a game that you can join and win something. So just make sure when you are in Vienna, make sure you visit the booth of DocuSign. And of course, from K2, our booth number will be number 17, just as a reference information for you to take away in case you like what you're going to see now in the next minutes. Good. So for those that are not that familiar with K2, let me briefly wrap things up a little bit. So K2 is an international software vendor with its headquarters in the United States of America, to say Bellevue in Seattle. It's actually very close to Microsoft, to which we maintain sort of a special relationship, of course. Then we have representatives in Europe as well. Our European headquarter is in London, and I'm actually representing K2 Northern Europe. So we are handling the German-speaking area, parts of Scandinavia and parts of Eastern Europe are actually handled by our team here, and we have our headquarters in Munich. So if you are looking for contacts of K2, make sure you're looking in the right region, and you will find a correspondent person to actually address some subjects directly. On the right side, there's a few high-level marketing information for you also to just take away. I don't want to emphasize them all. Let me just point out that there was a recent insight that said that more than 30% of the so-called Fortune 100 index are actually already K2 customers, which is a nice indication for us on which level the software is actually being used. And then the last information there, of course, there is a big pressure and a high demand for cloud-based computing and cloud-based platforms. That's very noticeable for us, and we're actually very busy coming up with an equal set of functionalities, no matter if we're looking at cloud K2 features or on-premise features. So keep an eye on that. There will be some announcements made very soon. Then I also have some references with me. Again, there it's not really on what names you see here. It's more to emphasize how widespread the usage of K2 is across all industries. So K2 does not have a certain focus on very particular industries like manufacturing, automotive, or pharma. You can see here on this picture, it's really, really very generic. And actually, it's also impossible to say in a comprehensive way what companies are doing with K2. Each customer is really enjoying the generic factor, and they're all doing maybe similar things. But in the end, the applications that are being built are actually then very different from an end user point of view, which also shows in this diagram. So just like you heard before from Daniel from DocuSign, of course there's some use cases very easily to identify. So let's just pick a few. Let's look at financial services where our customers are maybe doing claims handling applications, or they are doing a full-blown digital implementation of a client onboarding scenario. Then we hear very often that the platform is being used in legal and insurance industries, of course, as well. They were looking at contract management solutions, maybe long-running processes where an entire life cycle of a document, a contract, or maybe a customer handling is actually being supported digitally by K2. And of course, there's also HR departments looking at that. I mean, the classic use case, you know that leave requests or employment management solutions can be done with K2 as well. So what do we actually bring into play? It's important for you to take away that it's actually a lot more these days than just that workflow add-on or workflow platform that you might have in mind when you're thinking about K2, especially in the SharePoint community. So I want to emphasize that part of our product, which is actually all in one product, there's only one product portfolio. In addition, of course, to the workflow engine, we also bring a very capable UI technology, a forms engine, which we call K2 Smart Forms. So I have a screenshot here, and all the applications and all the forms that you will see later on in the live demo have actually been built using this piece of Designer. And you see it's web-based. It's a sort of what you see is what you get design time experience, where you can actually build your forms using drag and drop operations, and it's all declarative. You don't need to program at all to actually build any solutions. Then, of course, there's the web-based, also possibly SharePoint integrated workflow designers. I mean, workflow is, of course, still a very, very important piece when we are talking about digitalization. So you need a very flexible and dynamic, powerful workflow design experience, which shows actually in the fact that we have multiple designers at hand. So it can be web-based like this one. It can be very natively integrated in SharePoint using the provider-hosted app we bring for SharePoint. But we also have fat clients that allow you to do actually very complex process scenarios with a high performance and very high efficiency level. So that shows already on the designers that we bring how big the variety can be when it comes to the usage of K2. Then another part is, of course, data integration for these type of applications or automatizations that you're going to build. So eventually, such a process or workflow needs to be sort of intelligent or dynamic. That means maybe you need a workflow that looks at a different data source, maybe in a different SharePoint site collection, or maybe even in a different SharePoint farm, making use of some web services, maybe even an SAP, just to pick up some thresholds. And then based off that threshold, the workflow decides automatically, do we actually need a 4i principle for this approval? Do we need a 6i principle? Or maybe we need to do a different routing of the process entirely and maybe start a few sub-process because this is some sort of special handling and it's a high volume approval process. So your workflow needs to be capable to actually do that. And we can address this very easily using K2's patented smart object technology. So later on in that solution that we're going to look at, we actually make use of a bunch of backend systems. Of course, there's SharePoint into play, but we're also, for instance, making use of systems like Active Directory and also SAP. And then the last bit, so it's these four buckets on the bottom line that we're addressing is, of course, transparency and process insights. Because if you're starting to digitalize your processes, you're making heavy use of workflows, you need to have a tooling or a set of features that actually tell you how well performing or not well performing eventually are your applications. How many instances do you have per day, per week, per month, or per year? What are the average run times of these processes, of these routings? Maybe there are bottlenecks. And we bring you a lot of features and reporting capabilities that actually bring that insight right away to the UI of your application, and you see immediately if there's room for optimizations in which process steps. All right, so then when we look at the features of DocuSign and K2 combined, of course, there's a lot of synergy. So Daniel explained how great DocuSign is when it comes to document signature approval and document handling scenarios. So when we then do a joint and look at the challenges that both platforms are trying to address, it's very easy to identify that we're actually addressing similar challenges. And of course, together in combination, these products can support you to solve your problems and modern challenges even better than each platform could do alone. So what are these challenges? Of course, everything today needs to be mobile ready. So with K2 per default, an application form that you build is actually rendering HTML5 compliant output. That means it's automatically compatible with all modern browsers. But of course, we have also native mobile apps which you can make use of and then have an optimized experience, no matter if you're using a smartphone, a tablet, or actually a big work desk to work with. The nice thing is you actually need to maintain the application only once, so we're not creating clones for certain form factors. We're following a principle of single-time, one-time implementations, and these applications are then just reusable across all possible device factors that are on the market. Another thing we hear very often is that these processes are still very manual. So everything that is manual and requires a lot of human interaction, like things need to be printed out, need to be modified, then you need to scan it in and move the scanned document around. That is all very error prone. And we give you a great and very flexible approach to actually automate these things where you have a lot of room for optimizations and getting rid of manual processes. Then when we look at our customer base, we still see a lot of data silos, and these silos have never actually been made to be integrated with other environments. So using the smart object technology that I explained earlier, we actually give you a lot of options to put an additional layer on top of the existing IT landscape and allow you actually to integrate your existing line of business systems in a unified manner. So for instance, with K2, it doesn't matter if you're integrating a SharePoint list or library, if you're integrating SQL data, web service data, or SAP. From a design term perspective, you're always doing the same thing, right? You don't need any domain-specific knowledge to actually get there. And of course, the end users will not feel any difference, no matter where the data is actually coming from. Then there's also regulations. So your applications these days, especially when you're looking at finance situations, healthcare, pharma, these kind of things, there's a lot of very complex regulations, and you need a system that actually supports you to build individual applications that fit your individual requirements and still to be compliant to the regulations that are on the market these days. All right, so how do we actually then do this in combination with DocuSign? So naturally, we have predefined features and activities or connectors that you can use right away when you're getting K2, and they're very easy to connect with the DocuSign infrastructure or the cloud services they provide. And it's then a very small amount, very little efforts are required to actually build an integration like we have seen before. And actually, I have described the process that we're going to look at now in a minute briefly on this slide. So the solution we preferred is a vendor contract management. That's a scenario we're looking at. So of course there will be a dashboard experience, a bit of administration. We're going to look at that. But then when we create a new contract, you will see we're making use of SAP vendor data because we already have a vendor database, which could be coming from any sort of data bucket. Could be SharePoint, could be a database in SQL Server in this case. We're just using SAP because in this scenario we're pretending to have such a backend and ERP system already in place. So once we actually submit that new request, we're using K2 workflows to actually route that request, that new vendor contract, to certain instances that are going to be involved dynamically. So they're going to be a departmental management review, and then depending on the overall value of that new contract, in this case, if it is greater than 500,000 euro, we're actually dynamically involving the CFO, and you will see there's also a flag on the user interface where I can define, do I need a legal review as well? So if I set that flag to be true, we're actually going an extra routing in the process to involve somebody from the legal department there as well. Once these instances approve everything, the documents are actually getting prepared for the signature, for the signing of the document using DocuSign. And this is right there where their Create technology comes into play. So in this scenario, we're actually using a two-sided signature process. So first, an internal responsible person, an internal signer will be involved to do the document signing internally. And then we're involving the vendor party as well, and really leaving the K2 scope, sending it to an external user, and you will see that user can just then open up the request. You will end up on the DocuSign interface in the internet, can do the signature, and then it's being routed back to K2, and then we do a bit more of our business. We're doing some updates on the document. We persist it back in SharePoint, including all the signatures, and we're writing back some information to the SAP backend there as well. All right, so that's the use case that we have prepared, and I think it's time now to actually make the switch to the demo environment. So what you see now is actually my dashboard for this contract management. That dashboard is actually integrated in the K2 application work desk, which typically allows me, of course, to handle my business task, my objects where I've been involved. You see here there's a centralized task list where I see all the information that I need to know to work off the tasks that are in my pipeline. By the way, these informations and these tasks can come from SharePoint. They can also come from standalone applications that are eventually built with K2 as well. So part of this vendor contract management solution that we have is, of course, also a SharePoint environment. So we're using this SharePoint side contract management for sort of a document management purpose. So what's here is this vendor contract list that we're looking at right there. So everything that is being routed through the process will actually end up here per contract in a dedicated folder. That's all happening automatically. But we're also maintaining a template here in this SharePoint site. So this template is the current template that we're using for new vendor contracts. And you will see later on that we dynamically then fill the document with data that is being captured along this process. So before we look at that in detail, let's just get into detail here on this vendor contract management dashboard. So I mentioned earlier, insights is a very important piece. So of course, part of this dashboard that we see here, I can of course look at the existing contracts that are actually active. They're being routed at the moment through this solution. I have KPIs and indicators like how many are active. Maybe there are some overdue. At the moment, that's not the case. However, one is flagged to be urgent. So you see, that's all very flexible. Do not get confused. Your edition of these solutions can look completely different. They can have completely different styling, different properties, different routing. That's all just for demo purposes, the way it looks now. So, however, there's also like a vendor reporting dashboard. So I see immediately how many instances of contract management processes do we have. So I can click on this. It's sort of a drill down experience that I have here. I see for the signature of documents, apparently in this week and in the last week there is a bit of activity, so you can click on that. Then you see actually who's been involved on that matter. Also for other processes like the overall contract management routing process. Let's have a look at that. We see as well it looks a little bit different when it comes to the weeks. So last week there was a bit of traffic on that. I can select this. Then that actually breaks it down here into roles, who's been involved when, and then you can click on that in the same fashion, and then you see user performances, which user took how long to actually do this. And this is very easy and very handy now when it comes to optimization tasks. Like I see right away where's a bottleneck and where can we change something in this process. Another thing that is part of this application is the administrative part. And that's very nice because by using this approach, we can actually configure or give the responsibility for this configuration to the business. So if the business needs, like in this case, new categories, they can here centrally administer the categories being used in this application, and there is no requirement to actually involve IT or even development people to actually make these changes. There's also, really only for demo purposes, a central place where you can actually maintain the internal signer. In this case, it's an employee, it's the administrative account, and the external signer from the vendor, which I'm using my global K2 account for. That means later on I will get an email in my inbox, and you will see that in a minute. All right, so let's get started. I think it makes sense to just create a new contract request. So I see a bunch of master data for this contract that I need to maintain now. Of course, I mentioned we already have a vendor database. In this case, we're using SAP to actually pull that data off. So by clicking here on search, you can actually start typing and find the corresponding accounts in the backend. So let's quickly select Hugo Boss right there. That's this one. Let's pick this. You see I get live from SAP, I get a vendor ID, but there's also some sort of indication like something is wrong. There's currently active accounts being, or contracts being managed by this application. So it doesn't allow me to actually just throw in another contract for the very same account. It's some sort of validation logic happening. So let's just then pick another account. And let's just go here and search something else. Backend is really big at that stage. So let's pick Dell computers. And you see now this validation rule is gone. Then, of course, there needs to be a contract owner. So let's pick my account right there. You see, depending on the selection, there's being data pulled from Active Directory. Again, the departmental information there. Let's give this contract a proper title. Let's say this is the renewal contract 2016 for ESPC. It's a new, totally new contract agreement, so it's all new layout. We did some modifications on that. So let's say this is happening here in Germany. And now there's other functional areas. Keep an eye on the things like the tiny bits as well. So if I select different effective date, like from where on will this contract be effective? Let's pick the 1st of November. Actually, there's some calculations happening. Like in this case, the expiry date is just 1 year later. And there's also an automatic calculation for an annual review date being calculated right there as well. So then, of course, I need to maintain the amount for this contract. So let's pick 550,000 euro in this case. Let's put right there. Maybe we also have a budget allocated for this. Let's set this to be 600,000 euros. Right. That's how that could look like. I can also immediately flag this to be highly important, prior high. So let's do this. And there's this flag I mentioned earlier. I can actually say, does this contract require a legal review which would then dynamically involve the legal department to actually look at this new contract that we're gathering here at this stage. So in this demonstration, I'm actually going to skip that. I'm just going on here with the notes. New contract design with important changes. That's a note. Then I can define some signing information. That's going to be used actually for the notifications that I will get later on in that process. And of course, I can actually define who is the responsible signer internally. That is being pulled from the administration I showed a minute ago. And there's the vendor details as well. So I can actually override that, but let's just remain on the default data that is coming from the administration. Here's another tiny bit. So you see I could actually come up with advanced options and then actually dynamically configure the DocuSign part for the signature as well. So if I wanted to, I can actually come up with markups that DocuSign is going to apply on these things. I can allow reassignment on their part if that will be required. For now, for this demonstration, we're just going to leave everything on the default settings as it is. Then part of this new vendor contract, there might be some supporting documents. So let's have a look at that, what we have available here. So maybe we are doing a risk analysis for this vendor, and that has been taking place. So let's just upload that. That's a document. And typically, we're also going to have a business plan for new vendors, or generally for vendors. So let's select this one, and let's do a final check if everything is okay. So we're looking at Dell computers. There's an amount, there's a budget, there's the subscription, and there are supporting documents. So let me briefly then just submit that. And that will then bring me back to this dashboard. So keep note, this is the contract with the ID 14 there in the back end. Maybe we need that for reference in that domain later on. So what I could do here now right away, of course in my dashboard I see immediately the relevant information that has been captured. But I could also use other K2 functionalities that are just running in the background for you without any further doings. You don't need to configure anything or implement a special logic to do something, for instance, like this piece. K2 comes with something we call the view flow control, which is a visual representation of your digital process. And the nice thing is it gives you a colorful indication. You see immediately where is the process, what has already been executed. That's the green part. And currently we're sitting here. And the nice thing is you can actually click on that. It has a bit of a drill down character as well. And you see now who is actually in charge of this review as displayed earlier. It's actually a departmental manager that is now being involved. And you can also tell already from this view how the logic of this process actually looks like. So there's apparently these business rules being applied. So for instance, if this department manager, which I'm jumping into the role now in a minute, says he's going to approve this contract and the value is higher than 500,000, the process knows to involve another layer, which in this case is the CFO of our company. So let's just have a look at that. So I'm going to my task list, which is actually right there. And let's open that task form. So what I see here, I have a nice visual indication there on actually the progress of this contract routing. So at the moment we're in stage 2. I need to review the contract. So of course we're reusing form components that we used initially to actually create this contract request. But in this stage of the process, everything is just set to be read-only. The main thing is we don't need to rebuild that form, which is an important piece. Then, of course, I can make a decision. So I could actually approve this, and I can come up with a comment there as well. But before I do that, let's have a look at some more details of this form. So I mentioned there's a few indicators being used. But of course, there's also tabs if you look closely on the top, so I can actually have a look at the supporting documents. And if you remember, we actually added two. I added the risk analysis. I can look at that right there. Being in the role of the CFO, this is maybe very important to me, so I can understand, okay, how well has the risk defined, what's the scope of that for this vendor, and then I can just easily make a decision on that stage. There's also a bit of an audit log happening, and there is a task messages and conversations log, which is being maintained dynamically as this process evolves. So since we're in a very early stage, of course, everything is very blank there. There's nothing noticeably there. The thing is, these logs there, like messages, ad hoc tasks, and conversations, are actually sort of cross-references to other applications. And that's a nice feature of K2. So we can actually make use of other applications, like in this case, messaging applications. So if I wanted to, being a CFO, I can actually log a conversation with a reference to this contract that's being routed through. And I can say, this is a conversation I'm going to have with Marcus, this contract for Dell. And I say, nice job. Okay. Like a sort of an external communication path, and I can save that, and you will see later on as this goes on, this is being then actually maintained in these applications that we can use here, and there's a high visibility among that. It's not just living in my inbox. All right, so I think this looks all right, so I simply submit that and approve it right away. I'm ending up again on this dashboard, so let's have a brief look here at this process view flow. So we'll see it doesn't take long until that will be actually updated. So it happened just now, and as expected, as the value of the contract is higher than 500,000, we're actually moving from this departmental approval to the CFO approval. So we're now sitting here. There's the same principle. I see immediately who is being involved. So let's maybe read the CFO account. So that was Brandon, and let's pick him here from the headquarters group, and let's just open up his SharePoint portal. So Brandon is using SharePoint as a central interface to actually do document management, collaboration, like you would know it from SharePoint. And he actually has access to this start page dashboard that has been built with K2 capabilities as well. So you see already there, you can actually see, okay, there's a task for this new contract. Remember the IT14, and you can actually handle that task now right here from the SharePoint dashboard. But there's other things he could do. He could use also different business applications. For instance, let's briefly look at what is accessible here. So maybe he's looking at this sickness and absence portal. Again, there are different dashboarding experience, tightly integrated and built with SharePoint. And there's other reporting capabilities right there as well. Just to give you a brief overview on how differently K2 applications can be used. Remember, it's all been built using the same tooling, and it really doesn't matter if you use that inside of SharePoint, like in this case, or in the outside world of SharePoint there as well. So, all right, let's get back then to this task. Again, being in the role now of the CFO, I could actually look at that view flow control right from my task list as well. So you've seen that before. This is where we are sitting. And of course, I can actually do some task handling there as well. So the form now looks like this. Same experience. I just need to do a statement on that. If that is okay, you see the visual indication here is moving forward. I can scroll down. I can see everything that is relevant for me. Maybe in this role as well, I want to see the supporting documents. How about the business plan? That's right there at access for me. And maybe I'm interested in the log history for this there as well. And you see now the user Marcus actually before. So the administrator logged something for the user Marcus and left a note right there. So I have access to that as well, just as I have access to the audit look where I see which user actually made which statement at what date and in which role. Okay, So that, in my eyes, looks all great. So I simply route that through and approve that as well. So we're going to leave that row, close that off, and you'll see same story now. The view flow control only takes a few moments to actually refresh itself, and then we're actually making it to the signature part. So then it's getting interesting. So what's happening there now? You see it moved ahead, and we're now sitting there, and we're actually using a principle of sub-processing here. So this approval workflow started a dedicated signature process where I can just jump to using that view flow control as well. And there's now a few things happening already. So you see apparently we're initiating some things. We're gathering all the data that has been created for this approval. And then we're actually picking up a template from SharePoint that I showed before. I can actually now go to that and show you that quickly. So this is the new vendor agreement template that we're using. And you see initially, like what we're picking up from SharePoint, there's only placeholders in there, and there's no references to Dell or to the value of the contract. And you see later on with this little custom implementation that we have done here, that the document is being maintained internally automatically as well. And then we're creating a PDF version, sending it over to DocuSign, and now DocuSign actually comes into play. So we're maintaining all these DocuSign artifacts, like we're creating the envelope. We're actually adding the very document inside these envelopes, and then we're adding recipients for the DocuSign handling to these envelopes, and then actually pass it over the fence to the DocuSign engine, which is where we are now. So we're currently sitting here in this employee signature part, which is the internal party. Apparently that's my administrative account. So let's go back to my task list. Let's quickly refresh this. And I see here it's true. I need to sign this document now that has been created. So let's have a look at that task form. And you see again, each process step actually has a similar look and feel for me being the user. So the reusable aspect of these forms is actually very high, only in small nuances. The form is dynamic and brings actually then an optimized experience by showing me here now the actually maintained document. And you see from there on, we're looking at Dell computers, and this is for a renewal contract 2016. We maintained that initially. And also the value has been actually injected into this document. So what I could do now very easily with K2, and you see it's a really great experience, I already put my signature in the document backend, so DocuSign knows who I am, and I just need to click on there and really approve that this is my signature, and then the right person at the right time, and I can then just move on and actually finish that. So DocuSign now does more of its job, comes back with the document for me to review, and you'll see then that task has now been handled very easily. There's my signature. I can actually click on that and get more details about the signing user. So that has been the DocuSign part. It's now been handled. Of course, I still need to actually close the process related task. And I could say, okay, the signature is done, and I'll just submit that back. All right, so what then happens, as we can see here on this view flow control, it now actually is involving the external vendor. And now for this, to do this, I actually need to leave the K2 server context and really make a switch here into my DocuSign environment. And you see now I just got a bunch of emails and notifications that I need to do something. So let's just have a look at this notification. Apparently I need to sign a new vendor contract, so I can click on this, which brings me now to the cloud-based interface of DocuSign. And you see, okay, that's the document we're talking about. If I can scroll down or click here on continue, click here on next, I can jump immediately to the signature part. And I see already, okay, the internal party, it was the Linux administrator in the role of the department manager. He actually already signed that for the other party. And now me being the vendor, I just need to click on that here as well. I sign that, and I finish it off, and then DocuSign is doing more of its job and is bringing it back actually to K2. So if I remain now here in my inbox, you see sort of in real time, I actually get another notification that the document has been completed. And if I now do a click on that and have a look at this PDF, you see it's actually already maintained there. Everything is clear, how we would expect that. So we are going down. We can monitor the signatures there as well. Looks perfect to me. Then going back to the server environment of K2, everything is green now. So apparently the process has been completed. And you see there's actually a step in there, upload that document to SharePoint. So apparently that happened already, which enables us to actually have a look at that. So there's a new folder for the contract with the ID 14. I actually see the supporting documents that we uploaded, but of course I also see the vendor contract. So now I can click on that as well. And then you see it's the same document. I can actually scroll down. I see it's for Dell. And there are the two signature paths fully completed. All right. So just in time, we have 10 minutes left, exactly how we planned it. Shane, I would then give it back to you and open the door for questions and answers.
Sure, thank you very much for that. That was a great presentation, Marcus and Daniel. Okay, so first question is, can it work with any kind of SharePoint version?
My generic answer for this would be, at least for the K2 part, so Daniel, I'm going to give it back to you in a minute. Just let me handle the K2 side. So what K2 is offering is actually a unified experience, totally independent of your SharePoint version or SharePoint farm. So we have this provider-hosted app. It's a bit of a technical bit, but that app is actually exactly the same for SharePoint 2013, for SharePoint 2016, and also for SharePoint Online. So there is no difference in terms of feature set and usability from a K2 part. Maybe Daniel, you can add a few bits on the DocuSign story there as well.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so correct. For DocuSign, it's exactly the same. We can work in any kind of a SharePoint environment as well as Office 365 and everything like that. So in that sense, DocuSign is also available for all of those versions.
Brilliant. Okay, is this solution on-premise or cloud?
So maybe I'll start on my side, and then you can also add Marcus. So DocuSign solution has an on-premise solution, has a cloud solution, and has a hybrid solution. So in that sense, depending on the requirements of the customer, we can definitely offer different options that can fit exactly the needs, depending on, again, the needs of the customer and what it's they're looking for.
Well, yeah, similar story for K2 there as well. I just explained that we have this app, and it actually looks the same on-premise and in the cloud. And of course, the hybrid scenario is then the same story. So technically speaking, it really doesn't matter where you host your applications, maybe SharePoint or maybe the K2 part. The feature set and experience is really the same.
Okay, great. Does the K2 platform support scenarios inside and outside of SharePoint with the same experience with one product?
Yes. So we sort of expressed that as well. There's one now detail that is very important. That is the one product part. So if you go to K2.com, you will realize there is no dedicated product for SharePoint 2013 or SharePoint 2016. Or there's no dedicated product for standalone only. That means with that one product that we have, with that one platform, we're actually addressing the SharePoint world. Again, they're totally independent of the SharePoint version, or if it's cloud or on-premise, and also the standalone part, right? So that's a very important information, because that means if you know your SharePoint farm needs to scale out, or you're adding a new SharePoint server with a new version, there's no technical impact on K2. You can just connect to that to the existing infrastructure.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, guys. That's it for the questions. So thank you for your time today, and looking forward to catching up with you in Vienna.
All right. Thank you too. Looking forward to meet you.
Great.
Thank you on my side as well, and everybody. See you there. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, for today. That's it for today. For more top quality training, look no further than the European SharePoint Conference in Vienna, and see sharepointeurope.com for full details. That is it for now. Join us again for our next webinar on Thursday, November 3rd, for using SharePoint to streamline your IT department. Yes, please. Thank you and goodbye.